This video explains why we urgently need to transform the way we prevent and treat kidney disease. Health is an essential indicator of any country's prosperity. But in our aging societies, healthcare systems need a paradigm shift to cope with increasing demand and spiralling costs. In Europe, for example, nearly 100 million people suffer from chronic kidney disease. Current predictions for what's next are alarming. Today, CKD is one of the most expensive diseases for healthcare systems to treat, and dialysis has a substantial ecological impact. To remain sustainable, kidney patient care must shift from reactive hospital treatments to proactive prevention and treatments at home. This is the story of next-generation artificial organs, which are already well advanced. They need a relatively small investment to transform the lives of millions of kidney patients worldwide. To understand the importance of this journey, we travel to the Dutch province of Overijssel.
Welcome to the city of Kampen, the birthplace of artificial organs. This year we celebrate the pioneers who made the first breakthroughs in kidney replacement therapy. It began 80 years ago in the Netherlands, right here in the city of Kampen. During the Second World War, a young Dutch doctor refused to work with the Nazis. He also refused to believe the medical view of those times that nothing could be done for patients with kidney failure. As a result of his courage and dedication, Dr. Kolff's inventions keep millions of people alive today. His way of working still inspires the Dutch Kidney Foundations to keep pushing for new exciting developments. I invite you on a tour to explore the past, the present and possible the future of kidney replacement therapy. Meet your tour guide, scientist, Dr. Fokko Wieringa.
Before we embark on our journey, let's first learn about kidney failure through the story of a dialysis patient named Philip.
Philip undergoes dialysis 3 times a week. Why? Because his kidneys are highly damaged. Healthy kidneys remove waste products and excess water from our blood and secrete these in the urine. They also control blood pressure, blood sugar, and the acidity of our body. But what if our kidneys fail, as for Philip, a patient with chronic kidney disease? In this case, the removal of waste products is massively decreased and waste accumulates in the blood. This damages our organs and makes us sick.
When kidney function falls below 15%, to stay alive, either transplantation or dialysis is needed. Transplantation is by far the best option, but there's a shortage of donor organs. Also, not every patient is suitable for transplantation. Hence, dialysis is the mainstay therapy. Let me take you to the place where dialysis was invented by the amazing Dr. Kolff, who became known as the father of artificial organs.
So here we are in Kampen, a nice city nestled alongside the river IJssel in the Netherlands. This is the hospital where it all happened. Let's walk up to our host Herman Broers, who wrote a biography about Dr. Willem Kolff. Herman!
Good afternoon, Fokko.
Thank you for receiving us here today. So it's now 2021, but can you take us back to 1943?
Yeah, sure I can, and Dr. Kolff will help us. Let's go to the room where it all started.
All right. Nice.
Look at those 2 windows. That's where we're going.
Aha.
That's the Kolff room.
That's the Kolff room.
Yep.
Great that they preserved this nice building. And it's now an elderly home.
What fascinated me about Kolff was his pioneership. Being a pioneer in the middle of nowhere during World War II, saving millions of lives, with nobody around, inventing new machines like that. An extraordinary character. Here it is, after you.
Okay, so this is it. Huh. Well,
so this is the 1942-1943 Kolff rotating drum, artificial kidney. And this is the replica that was built.
Yeah, I see that one had the famous aluminium taken from a crashed plane.
Yeah, this was from the shot down plane, and in the replica it's wood, because the second and third version was also a wooden drum.
Wooden drums,
because
yes.
aluminum you couldn't get
No.
to anymore after the first one. But you see that the patient is connected with this rubber tubing. It goes from here through
Peristaltic pump, yes.
the blood pump, yes,
Yes.
and at speed it goes into the connecting.
This is the famous T-Ford water coupling.
This is the T-Ford water pump, yes.
I see, this is the famous sewing machine.
Yep, on the
Engine.
first version there was sewing
Yeah,
machine,
yeah.
later on it was a real machine.
Yeah. I remember that my grandma indeed first had a hand sewing machine, then later on she bought an engine that you could refit with such a, with a belt.
During the very first dialysis, Janke had to take over because electricity
Was on ration.
Yeah. Well, then the blood goes into the machine. You have the connecting water pump of the T-Ford, and then it goes into the cellophane. And this is where actually from here to there, rotating in this bath of dialysate, where the dialysis takes place. You know, it is
it's the exchange.
bringing toxic waste products from the blood from one fluid to another through a membrane. In moving condition.
So what we nowadays have as a dialyzer, say about this height and this diameter, with all the fibers inside having the same surface as this, or even more nowadays.
It's better. It's working better on a smaller surface, but it's doing exactly the same
exactly.
as back in 1943. Like the 6 nurses and technicians that Kolff used for kind of, well, the work the computer does now.
They did all the sensing and the computing, yes.
Yeah.
Really amazing. Huh?
And then the blood returns the same way to the patient.
It comes out again.
After being cleaned by this machine.
Return to the patient. And it actually worked.
It worked.
Actually worked.
Yeah. It must have been an astonishing sight to see.
Of course.
And to hear.
Oh yes, let's hear
13 hours.
Let's hear this.
A night.
For 13 hours. So the first successful dialysis session on Sophia Schafstad took 13 hours.
13 hours and 80 grams of urea was taken out of Sophia
80
Schafstad.
grams, which is quite a considerable amount.
And to watch a patient wake up after that must have been incredible.
Okay, let's sit down and talk about it.
Kolff was motivated by watching a patient die. After he was brought up by a doctor, his father, he went to study medicine in Leiden in the west of Holland, and after getting his degree he went to Groningen in the north.
I was this young assistant at the University of Groningen. My responsibility was for 4 beds, or rather the patients in 4 beds. That was all I had to do. And one of these patients was a young man, 22 years old, who slowly and miserably died from renal failure. He became blind, he vomited, and it was a miserable death. And I, as a very, very young physician, had to tell his mother, in her black dress and a little white cap like the farmers have, that her only son was going to die. I couldn't do a damn thing about it. So I began to think, if I could just every day remove as much urea as this boy creates, which is about 20 grams, then this boy could live. Well, he died, but I began to work on that.
Kolff's work was interfered in May 1940, when war broke out. The Nazis invaded Holland unexpectedly, and that had its consequences for the hospital. Polak Daniels, the professor Kolff was working for, committed suicide. He was Jewish, and that changed the whole scenery in Groningen. Kolff decided he didn't want to work for a Nazi who was the next doctor in charge. And so he left for Kampen to find a job and brought his artificial kidney project with him.
Kampen is a small city, and they were very nice to me. They wanted to have an internist, and I was the first for a very small hospital. And I made the royal sum of 10,000 guilders per year in the first year, divided by 2.5, and you have the number of dollars that I made. I said, now I can afford to make an artificial kidney.
Kampen was an isolated city on the seashore, and the river IJssel, there were 19,000 people living here, and they had only one doctor in the hospital, and Kolff became the second one. And so it was a small town, but it was perfect for his artificial kidney project because nobody was watching.
Now this here is cellophane tubing. It looks like a ribbon, it's not, it's hollow. And it is artificial sausage skin. And it's an excellent dialyzer. And with dialysis means that if you had blood inside here, small molecules will go through the pores of the membrane to the outside where you have a dialyzing fluid. And so urea and other products that the kidneys normally excrete will go out. And another thing happens. Sodium chloride and other electrolytes would also go out. So you add them to the dialyzing fluid on the outside, and now they go out and in. And you get an equilibration through this membrane. So if the sodium of the patient is too low, it goes higher, and if it's too high, it goes lower. It normalizes it. And this white powder is urea, and all this urea was removed in one dialysis. Which is incredible, isn't it? It goes very fast. And in the beginning, there were always people that said, well, urea is not toxic. I would say, eat it. But I knew exactly what I wanted to do. I wanted to remove urea and other products that are excreted by the kidney by dialysis. And I'd taken the cellophane, and I had filled a small piece of cellophane tubing about this long with blood. I added the urea to it. I shook it up and down in a bath with saline. And from this I could calculate that I needed 10 meters of this stuff and that the blood had to be continuously in motion and the dialyzing fluid also in motion. I also had heparin to prevent clotting. So all I had to do was make a machine with sufficient surface area to make it worthwhile. And that's what I did.
So of course Kolff didn't do it all by himself. So how did he build his kidney team? And how did he work with the local community here?
Kolff had the quality of recruiting everyone enthusiastically for whatever effort he was trying. He did that from a young age, starting here in Kampen. The first he worked with was the head nurse, Sister Maria Terwelle. She was 10 years his senior, but worked for him. He also recruited Mineke van der Leij from Groningen. She did the lab work. Kolff was not looking for diplomas, Kolff was looking for skills. Interesting example of that is the porter, Andries Sijbrands. He worked with Kolff for years, not having any diploma. He was a carpenter, but he was very handy and he got an education in Groningen from Kolff and worked with him doing the autopsies. The other one is Bob van Noordwijk. He was a student here coming to Kampen from Groningen. He was in the resistance in Groningen, had to hide and worked for Kolff for 15 months. And he brought the machine to life.
So here in this very room, the first hemodialysis treatment that awoke a patient from a uremic coma happened. Who was this patient?
The first patient treated by Kolff was Jannie Schrijver. She was a housemaid from Zwolle. She collapsed at work one day and she turned blind. And that's why she visited an eye doctor in Zwolle. And he knew what was wrong with her, that she had kidney problems, and said, well, I can send you to Dr. Kolff. He might have some new ideas on how to treat you.
So Jannie arrives per ambulance, the tricycle, and her father is with her. And, you know, Kolff takes him apart. And he's the first doctor that explains him in plain language what's actually happening to his daughter. And this man listens intensely. And he asks, of course, can you save my daughter? And Kolff is very plain about that. He says, she's very, very ill. There's very little chance. But I'll do my very best to do for her what I can. So Father Schrijver decides that the vicar should come first to bless her and pray with her. And when Jannie falls into uremic coma, he says, it's time. And so they wheel her off to this very room, and Jannie is connected. And it's March 17, 1943. So first they do batch-wise blood withdrawal, treat it with the machine, and put it back. And Jannie stays alive for 14 days, but it doesn't help enough. And she gets overly punctured, because for every connection they need to cut another vessel to take the blood and put it back. And Kolff starts realizing, he's running out of time. So he decides to put Jannie in line with the machine, which hasn't been done anywhere before. This is a historical moment. So they connect her in line and wait. They take turns at the bed with the kidney team. And after a long wait, the miracle happens. Jannie regains consciousness. On April 4th, 1943, Jannie Schrijver was the first patient ever recovering from a uremic coma by hemodialysis. She's clear-minded, she can talk, she is really conscious. It's a miracle. This gives Kolff hope. This is a clear miracle. Jannie might pull through. But unfortunately, 2 days later, she has a relapse, falls into coma again. They again connect the machine. And in total, they do this 4 times. And then, unfortunately, the arterial connection is not doing it anymore. Everything starts leaking, the bath starts foaming. They have to disconnect Jannie, and they know she's doomed now. And so she's wheeled off from this room and will die. So actually, if Jannie would have been an acute kidney failure patient in the sense that we know now, she would have pulled through. But her kidneys were already deteriorated so much that she had become chronically dependent on dialysis. That was the reason that after 2 days, every time she relapsed. But unfortunately, vascular access was not to the point that it is nowadays. Chronic dialysis wasn't possible in those days yet. Kolff connected the patient to the machine using glass cannules. That's of course a crazy sounding idea nowadays to have glass cannules going up your vessels, but it was how he did it in those days. And every time he had to sacrifice a blood vessel in order to connect the patient, getting the blood out and getting the blood in. And that of course leaves you only so much time. There's only so much vessels you can use. So it turned out that the machine itself actually was doing quite good a job. But the vascular access, that was the Achilles heel. And this problem was only solved in 1960 in Seattle by Wayne Quinton and Belding Scribner. So those 2 breakthroughs, the machine and the vascular access, that formed the basis for chronic dialysis, which is saving millions of lives until today. And in 2002, Kolff and Scribner got the Lasker Award for that.
By the way, if at that time either an institutional review committee for research on human patients or the FDA had been breathing in my neck, the artificial kidney would never be made.
After Jannie Schrijver died, her father approached Dr. Kolff and said, "You've done a lot to save my daughter. What do I owe you?" Kolff didn't want to be paid for treating Jannie Schrijver, but the farmer insisted. So he paid him 60 guilders and went home to bury his daughter.
Well, I think I can imagine why Mr. Schrijver insisted so much on paying Kolff. I mean, as a farmer, he knew there's no harvest without sowing. And there's no sowing without an investment money to put the stuff in the ground. So he clearly realized a medical miracle had happened. Everybody was telling him, your daughter's going to die. She's going into coma, never recover, going to die. But he witnessed 4 times a miracle. And he believed this work should go on. So Kolff, being a family man, how was his wife involved in all this?
Dr. Kolff's experiments in Kampen were paid by his wife, Janke. Many of the machines, nobody was there to pay for it. You know, the Nazis wouldn't do it. any doctor wouldn't do it. So then the family fortune of the Huidekopers stepped in, and she's been paying the bills on this artificial kidney project for many years, up till when they were in the United States. She was around with one of the, or two of the first experiments. She even wheeled the machine for a few minutes, but she was left out all of it, you know. She was the doctor's wife, she was at home, but she was very, very important for this breakthrough. Willem Kolff always said, my contribution to medicine is creating an atmosphere wherein Pim Kolff could work.
So let's now jump in time. The war's over, and on September 11th, 1945, the first acute kidney patient that was saved by hemodialysis is treated by Kolff.
Kampen was liberated in April 1945, and the liberation brought a patient because Sophia Schafstad, patient number 17 as his reports, she fell ill in prison. She was a Nazi sympathizer, and she was brought to the hospital with kidney failure, and right after liberation Kolff decided to treat her. Which was extraordinary in itself, because half the population in the hospital would have thought she didn't deserve any treatment because of her political ideas. But Kolff didn't make any difference between anybody.
She was comatose when she came in. And after so many hours of treatment, I bent over her and said, "Mrs. Schafstad, can you hear me?" And she slowly opened her eyes and said, "I'm going to divorce my husband." And she did. Well, this woman then was a National Socialist. And when I talked about her a few months later in London, I said, it's now been proven, I think, that the artificial kidney can save a life. It has not been proven yet that it is of any real use to society. But of course the moral is that we have to treat patients when they need help, even if we don't like them.
There's a link to today as well. Many COVID patients with a severe infection that need the ICU to survive need temporary dialysis in order to recover. And about 1/3 of those have so much kidney damage that they will need dialysis chronically. So Kolff is extremely thankful to the liberators that came to Holland and freed us. He doesn't take a patent on a machine. He builds 4 extra and sends them around the world at his own cost, well, Janke's cost, to Poland, to England, to Canada and the United States, to spread the good news and thank our liberators.
After Kolff successfully published about the artificial kidney in 1946, he was asked all around the world to give talks. And he made a tour through the United States in 1947 and again in 1948 and told them about his artificial kidney project, which was not very well received in Holland. So on one side you have those reluctant Dutchmen asking all kind of difficult questions, and on the other side you have those enthusiastic Americans deciding they need Kolff for their inventions in the future. So then he decided he wanted to leave the country. I think he decided that 1948, but needed time to get it done. And he left the country in a hurry in March 1950 because he had an appointment. He was appointed as a lab assistant in the Cleveland Clinic with Dr. Irvine Page in March 1950. And so he was leaving early. But I think he did right to do so. Holland didn't recover till 1960.
So Kolff had a vision. He saw a need. He had the medical knowledge, and he was a good tinkerer. And he combined all that. He rose to the occasion, and he had the luck that, you know, there was no official people looking down his neck. So he could do these experiments. Nowadays, if you would have had patient 3 dying, they would have said, stop all the experiments, this is dangerous. But he could go on, and he learned meticulously from everything he did wrong, or at least not optimal. And in that way, by also recruiting talent that surrounded him, just grabbing the people that were driven and curious and wanted to help, he could make a miracle happen. But his wife Janke supported this with actual money from the family. And without that, it would have also been doomed. And you know, nowadays, if we see calls for proposals and grants, the weird thing is, and this is written down in a great journal called Science of Science, that many grant proposals are being judged in a way that they avoid the risk of too visionary, too daring, too breakthrough things, which is weird, because in the end, it's what we want. So there was a famous quote when Kolff, his team, implanted the first artificial kidney. The dean of Utah University said, every university needs a Kolff, but not more than one. And that is what we need. We need to have also a funding system that is recognizing the potential of people like Kolff nowadays and giving them the opportunity to dig into it and really do the work and really try things. Because COVID learned us one thing. You need to think out of the box, you need to work together, you need to combine the best brains, and you need to do it fast. Because, you know, diseases know no borders, and innovation in medical disciplines is badly needed. So although Kolff had to start at the bottom of the ladder again in 1950, he very quickly climbed it. In 1955, the American Society for Artificial Internal Organs, ASIO, was founded, and Kolff was elected as the first president. Rightfully so, it turned out, because later Kolff in Utah led a team that built and implanted the first total artificial heart. But that's a story for another day. Let's thank Herman Broers for receiving us in this historical room here, and of course you for watching. And I'd like to leave you with a remark that Kolff made to his students on how to succeed in the modern world. I think it's timeless.
Inventions are rarely made when you're sitting at your desk, not when you're writing. Inventions come at 4 o'clock in the morning. My wife then said, I can't sleep. The bed is full of electricity. Poor thing. She'd been very supportive, but it must be difficult. And in Holland, I would take my bicycle and bicycle through the meadows, and that's the time inventions come.